right. Good afternoon, everyone. It is so good to see you all. Thank you for coming this afternoon. Today is a great day for some air conditioning, let me tell you. Glad you made your way here. My name is Andrew Westover. I'm the Eleanor McDonald Storza Deputy Director for Learning and Civic Engagement here at the High Museum of Art. As you probably are well aware, this program is in conjunction with our new exhibition, Faith Ringgold Seeing Children, which of course was organized by the High Museum. Thank you, yes, we're very excited for it. The exhibition is currently on view, just opened this week, and will be on view until October 12th. So we encourage you, if you haven't yet seen it, of course, after this conversation, please go and see it. And remember to come back and bring little ones. This exhibition is especially designed to welcome all ages. Your program ticket will, of course, give you access to the museum. At the end of the conversation, there will be an opportunity to ask questions, and you'll be able to submit questions using a QR code that we'll have on the screen. So let me see if we can, this QR code. So if you would like, feel free to go ahead and pull out your phone, take a picture, or use the QR code. Don't take a picture, that won't help you. Use the QR code, and that way you can type your questions at any point during the program, and we'll address them at the end. I want to thank a couple of sponsors before we begin. A big thank you to our presenting sponsor, Invesco QQQ. Special thanks to Goizueta Foundation, which supports the Woodruff Arts Center Youth and Family Programming, and thank you to our exhibition series donors, Delta Airlines, Harry Norman Realtors, and Benefactor Exhibition Series supporters Robin and Hilton Howell. This afternoon, as you're probably well aware, we are joined by two distinguished guests. I know you've already seen their biographies online and on the screen beforehand, so I won't reiterate them. I'll simply say that we are honored and excited to hear from scholar, writer, and Ringgold's daughter, Barbara Wallace. And curator, writer, Fulbrighter, and Pulitzer Center Reporting Fellow, Nailah Reine Barnes. Wonderful. Thank you so much for welcoming our incredible guests today. So I'd like to start by inviting each of you, and perhaps Barbara, we will start with you, to ask you to tell us a little bit about when you first encountered your mother's making art. When you first encountered art making, noticed that as you all were together, and what that was like for you as her daughter. And here's a microphone for you.
Well, hello everyone. I have to say, my earliest memories of my mother making art, the first memory that I have is a smell. And the smell is turpentine and oil paint. Mom was painting her American People series, I guess. Of course, she also did watercolor paints when we would go to Martha's Vineyard in Cape Cod, and we would, on our summer vacations. But that doesn't have a smell. And we were on vacation, we were having fun. But at home, in her studio, which was a bedroom, Mom would be painting these incredible paintings of people. And they looked like people, but they didn't look like people, because the people had these circles in their faces, which apparently was super realism. And their eyes had circles, and their mouths had circles, and their faces had these big circles in them. But the smell is a thing that stays with me. Turpentine smell, oil smell. Mom would be cleaning her brushes. And I have to say, her negligees were always in strings, because the turpentine melted the fabric. And so it destroyed all her negligees.
She was dedicated. She was dedicated to making those works.
Yeah. And the gesso, I remember that she would be stretching the canvases on the stretcher boards. And she would stretch the canvas, and she would bop, 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 bop. She was stapling the canvas onto the stretcher boards. Bop, bop. And I mean, it's a dumb memory, but that's what I remember. Bop, bop, bop. And I would think, oh my God, I hope she doesn't staple her finger. And she wiped that white stuff. It's snow white. Wipe that gesso on that canvas, and then let it sit till the next day or maybe 2 days. And I sneak in there and I touch it. It's dry. And then she'd do it again. White it down. Snow white. And I'm wondering, why does it have to be so white? Well, none of your business why it has to be so white. It just had to be so white. And I'm sure she used to cure it twice.
It's
That
amazing.
didn't have a smell. The gesso didn't have a smell.
Right, right. It's amazing to me to hear how much of this is a sensory memory for you, because so many of her works do engage all of these bodily senses. And Nailah, I wanted to ask you as well. Obviously, you were not growing up in Faith Ringgold's home.
I wish, oh my goodness.
But I'd love to hear, when did you first encounter Faith Ringgold's work?
Absolutely. So for me, I grew up in a household full of educators. My mom is a teacher. She's a college professor. My dad is a mathematics teacher. So our home was filled with books. And Tar Beach was on our bookshelf. And it was a text that we were read to when we were very, very young. And then my brothers and I grew up and we read it ourselves. And I just remember that image, excuse me, of deciding that you can imagine, you can look up into the sky, this is what we're looking at here, and you can fly through the world. You can be within the circumstances that maybe aren't as, bright and shiny and rich and affluent as you maybe would hope, but you can imagine the world that you want to be in. And so I think reading Tar Beach inspired a lot of the work that I do now, inspired me to want to become a curator, to want to become a traveler, to want to be able to bridge people with different complex histories and to expand knowledge bases. And so that was my very first introduction to Faith Ringgold's work, was through Tar Beach. And since then, it's grown. So I just want to quickly correct my name. It's Nailah Reine Barnes, or Hen.
So sorry.
It's okay, but it's a good entry point because my middle name is Hen, which means queen in French. And Faith Ringgold spent a lot of time in France. She was somebody who knew that there was rich culture and ways to express herself everywhere. She didn't want to be limited. She didn't want to say, I'm only working with Black aesthetics that a lot of her contemporaries in the 1960s were deciding. She said, I want to go see the Louvre. I want to go to Giverny. I want to go meet these different artists and experience what they have to offer and then incorporate that into my work. So in a lot of the paintings that we now know and love Faith Ringgold for, she's in these artistic dialogues with different European artists. So many of you might know the work Die. It's really graphic, and it's a depiction of the violence that was happening in the late 1960s, 1967 to be exact, but the composition of that piece is based upon a Picasso work. So I think it's really important, all of us having that creative spark in us, but also potentially perhaps working with children, to not limit where we can decide we want to locate ourselves, where we want to find inspiration from, because then, picking back up with my middle name, I went and studied in France for a year when I was 16. My parents let me do that, and it was incredible and set me on the path that I'm on now. So that's my long way of saying it's been a lifetime of Faith Ringgold inspiration. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And part of what I really appreciate about that is, you're right, within Faith Ringgold's work and her life, there was so much of the sense of broadening, of looking beyond established narratives and thinking about what else? What are we not accounting for? What else are component parts of America's story, of how we came to be here, of what it means to live together in this society? And maybe, Barbara, I can turn back to ask you now. I know we were talking before, and you mentioned how sometimes you were almost a research assistant for your mother as she was thinking about creating these works. And specifically, we were talking about that quilt that tells a bit of the story of Brooklyn and Crown Heights. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, well, you want to know
With the microphone.
Oh, sorry. You want to know the background story? Okay. Well, there was a car accident. A gentleman ran over, a Hasidic gentleman ran over a black boy in Crown Heights. And it was a mistake. He accidentally, and the community became enraged. And I'm not sure if he actually owned up to it immediately. There was a lot of controversy about it, and there was some rioting, and the whole thing just got way out of proportion. And in the end, the public schools commissioned Mother to create a quilt. And it was a quilt that I think she sort of had an open assignment to create this quilt for a school, a public school in Crown Heights in Brooklyn. And she decided it would be a historical quilt. She assigned me to get the history of Crown Heights, the people, a historical. Mother was, well, our family actually was very much history-centered. So she says, okay, I want to start with the history of Crown Heights, the people who settled Crown Heights. So, of course, we started with Native Americans. And my job was, on my day off, I was an elementary school teacher at the time. On my day off, I went to the Brooklyn Public Library, which was open on Sundays. And I started with the Native Americans, the Mohawks, and another Native American group, which escapes me right now. But I started, she said, we're going to do children's stories. So I started with some Native American children's stories. And then I went to the second group second and third group that came to Brooklyn, which was African Americans. We came over on the Mayflower. And I believe it was the Dutch, perhaps, that came here, and the British, Peter Stuyvesant. And then I went on to other groups that came to Brooklyn. Italians and Puerto Ricans came to Brooklyn, and I went on and on to, chronologically, to the people who came to Brooklyn and their children's stories. And Mother created this quilt. She put 12 squares. Mother was very geometry centered. She made 12 squares, 4 across, 3 down, and created an image. I don't know what the artistic word for it is, but a picture of a children's story for each of the folk tales of these people. The Mohawks, it was a man who ate fire. It was a story of a man who ate fire, the Mohawk story. And the peg leg Pete was the Dutch story. And I'm not remembering all of the stories, offhand. The Koreans came to Brooklyn very early, and the Italians came to Brooklyn very early. So Mom made a picture of this children's story for each of these early settlers of Brooklyn. And this was the Crown Heights Children's Story Quilt.
What I love about this, too, is there's this direct link between Faith Ringgold's work as a visual artist and her consideration of children, how children make meaning, how children understand the world, how fables and fairy tales can play into that. It's really an incredible body of work. And the exhibition, sorry, I should say a word or two about the exhibition at some point. The exhibition, if you haven't yet seen it, of course, please go see it, focuses on Faith Ringgold's children's literature. So if you only know Faith Ringgold as a painter or as someone who created these incredible story quilts or soft sculptures or performances or protests, you should also know that she is one of America's great children's book creators. And that's part of what this exhibition is designed to show. So when you go, you'll see that she creates stories that intersect with America's histories. She talks very explicitly about who came to this country, when did they come, how did they come, and how did all of these things come together to build the country we are now sharing today? Nailah, yes.
And Andrew, have I left out the Africans? The Africans came, well, they were Africans on the Mayflower, and their story was Anansi. They were in there, and they're in the Crown Heights Children's Story Quilt.
Yes. Yes, and that's something too that these children's books hold at the forefront, is there's no hiding back from the realities of enslavement as part of America's story as well. The stories talk about the free movement of people, and the stories talk about the movement of enslaved people quite directly. And what I find so incredible in these stories is that she's able to do it in a way that is developmentally accessible for young people. I know I don't know how you grew up. I grew up in East Tennessee, and in the community I grew up in, these were not stories that were regularly told. If they were told in hushed voices, using really not great language, you know? And what I find so helpful with these stories is it brings it to light. It states things truthfully, and it states things in a way that any age a person can understand and see how it got us to where we are today, which I think is so, so critical. Nailah, I'm wondering for you, as you think about this relationship between the work that Faith Ringgold created and sort of the model that she's setting. You work now as a curator, and you're working a lot with living contemporary artists who are thinking about Faith Ringgold's work, or that it informs their practice. Could you share more about what you're hearing in that lane?
Definitely. I want to speak about some contemporary artists in a moment, but I also want to highlight that in the 1960s, when Faith Ringgold was really beginning to blow up, so to speak, when she first was represented at Spectrum Gallery in 1967, had an opening. She was the only Black woman represented by that gallery, and really paved the way for access, where there were now going to be her contemporaries who were African American visiting an uptown gallery where they previously would not have been feeling welcome. At the same time, white audiences were going to be encountering these really real violent histories, contemporary moments actually at that time in the 1960s, when there was so much violence towards Black people. So I want to start us there at that point, because then 3 years later, we have a woman named Linda Good Bryant who founds and opens a gallery in uptown New York as well, called Just Above Midtown, where we now can pinpoint that that was an incubation space for some of the most renowned contemporary artists that we know at the moment. So thinking about somebody like David Hemmons or Howardina Pindell, these people all got their start at Just Above Midtown, where Linda Good Bryant decided, hey, I also want to have a gallery in uptown New York. I'm going to follow in Faith Ringgold's footsteps and make space for myself in a world as a Black woman where I'm not always going to be listened to and I'm not going to be able to to be my full self. So I want to begin there. And then I also, to bring us further into the contemporary moment, there are a lot of artists who I encounter, one in particular, Mickalene Thomas, who's a photographer, but also has, somebody's clapping, yes, she has a multimedia practice as well. She had an exhibition, I'm right now based in London, she had an exhibition at the South Bank Art Gallery where I was able to encounter a work where she was directly referencing Manet's Jardin, Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe, and that is a painting that Faith Ringgold also references. And so we see somebody like Mickalene Thomas, who is maybe in her 40s, I'm not quite sure, like a young working artist, directly being in dialogue with historical figures in the way that Faith Ringgold modeled. So yeah, I wanted to point those out.
Thank you, thank you. It's incredible to see how wide and deep Faith Ringgold's work has been acculturated, spread, and has informed so many creatives all across this country. Another element of the children's books that I want to circle back around to is that children's books themselves are a really interesting form for cultural knowledge to circulate. So Faith Ringgold's paintings are in the world, her sculptures are in the world, and yet there are many people in the world who don't necessarily engage on a regular basis with contemporary painting and sculpture. And so Faith Ringgold was telling these stories, was thinking about these important moments in history, and was also thinking about who might benefit from having access to them. Now, I know, Barbara, that you have thought a lot about these books and how they move through the world. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit of when these books were first coming out. How did they get into the world? How did people find them? And how did they spread such that they became as popular as they are today?
Well, my experience with the books is that I was, as I said, a public school teacher. I was teaching at a school actually across the street from where I live. And it was very exciting for me because I taught in elementary school, and our district was circulating the books for free. So Aunt Harriet's Underground Railroad in the Sky was distributed to every second grader in the district. I taught at Harlem. I live in Harlem, and I taught in Harlem. So every child in District 5, which was, I don't know, maybe 10 schools, I don't know how many hundreds of children, got a free paperback copy of Aunt Harriet's Underground Railroad in the Sky. It was a district initiative. And I found out, and I used to go out in the street and sell the books on street corners. I'd pack up a shopping cart, throw a bunch of books in a cardboard box, and put it in my shopping wagon and put a folding table and chair and go out. We have a Harlem Book Fair in the third week of July. And I would go out, I live a block from the Schomburg Research Center, and I go out in front of the Schomburg on the third Saturday in July and sell the books. And the books were immensely popular. People would come from all over the city to the Harlem Book Fair, and they would go nuts over these books, and they would buy them. And they knew the books because it wasn't just District 5 in Harlem from 123rd Street up until 155th Street that was circulating these books. The city schools were circulating these books. Everybody loved the books. So I guess Crown Publishers was circulating the books.
That makes
And Tar Beach, in the show, folks, there's a part of the show where there's a chair and there's a great big Cassie doll. Well, when Tar Beach first came out, there was a little tiny book about that size, a Tar Beach book, and a doll. So back then, in 1991, I guess the publishers, I guess my sister could back this up, she's sitting right there, Michelle Wallace, the one and only, could back this up. Publishers, maybe they had bigger budgets back then, but there was a Cassie doll that was about, I don't know, is that about 10 inches? There was a Cassie doll that was in a box. And
There is one
that's the
in the
small
audience. Hey.
Hello, that's the small Cassie doll. And there was another Cassie doll that was a little bigger than that one that came in a box. And then there was a little book that went with it. So I don't know what that doll was for, some sort of kind of a promotion. And like I said, back then, I guess the publishers had bigger budgets.
It's true.
And they circulated this doll and this little book to promote sales, perhaps. And Mom, I guess maybe the author went on a book tour, and Tar Beach just blew up. And a lot of people do Tar Beach. I would talk to folks, white, black, and everything in between, and they could relate to Tar Beach. Going up on the roof on a hot night and trying to get cooled off. Everybody could relate to Tar Beach. Mom was relatable. What can I say? And then on Harriet's Underground Railroad in the Sky, I don't know. The schools were circulating them is all I can say. And then the third book, what was it, Dinner at Aunt Connie's House? The book was $4.95. What can I tell you? People love that price. It's $5. Parents loved that price. There were 12 black women who had changed things. It was historically powerful. You gave your kid a history lesson for $5, and the price was a winner. If I could get you to stop, I had a little counter, and I would sit there and I would count how many people passed the table. 10 out of every 10 people who passed my table, one person would stop. And if I could show them that book, that it was $5, they were going to buy it. Who doesn't buy a $5 book that's going to give your kid a history lesson? Huh?
And there was a very good salesperson there as well, as you can see. Amazing. Nailah, were you going to say something?
Well, I was just gonna say that the sort of universality in Faith Ringgold's specific lived experience is, I think, why the books resonate so deeply. And I also wanted to point out that we're at a really difficult time right now, where we're back to a place where books are being banned, where education is under attack, where these histories are being pushed under the rug. And it hurts my heart to think that we're continuing to be in a place where Black women artists, Black women illustrators, writers, children's books, creators are not proportionately represented on the market. And so I'm really grateful for this exhibition and to see where it goes, to see how can we invigorate, how can we make sure that we continue this work and that there is representation that matches who we are as people and all of the things that we bring to the table. And I think Faith Ringgold did that so brilliantly, but then open the door for others to do the same. And so I'm just excited to pick up the mantle, pick up the baton, and continue to engage with contemporary artists who are doing this work, and then hopefully make it to publishers, places like Penguin Random House, and these other, behemoths of industry that have so much pull, but aren't publishing at the rates that are representative of Black women.
That's a really, I think, pivotal part of this story too, is when this happened, when these books were published. Tar Beach, as you may know, was published in 1991, which is a very specific time, right? If you think back, for those of you who were around at the time, 1991, this is peak multiculturalism in America. This is a moment where there were lots of people trying to figure out, how do we live together in a multiracial society? What does it mean to highlight stories that are different from our own or similar? This was, right, 91, 93, the Whitney Biennial at the time was struggling with these similar ideas. And this particular story, Tar Beach and Marie Brown and Crown and the folks who made it happen, I think they really got lightning in a bottle because it was an opportunity to foreground Cassie Louise Lightfoot, the girl flying here, whose story was particular. It was specific. It was from her position as a young black girl in Harlem. And it opened in a way that allowed anyone to see parts of themselves in it. If you ask young children if they could have any superpower, I also was a teacher, usually the youngest will give one of two. They'll either say, I'd like to be invisible, or I'd like to fly. And I think that these books tap right into that. Another of the books that's featured in the exhibition is The Invisible Princess, about a young girl who is invisible to most people. And that's a major plot point, but it's one that is profoundly relatable to young people and allows these stories, even though they are specific, to be opened up to a much broader audience. And I think that's one of the real treasures and beauties of them. So I also would like to ask now, perhaps a personal story. As you all read these stories or think about these stories, are there individual books or characters or moments from the stories that really resonate with you? Individual books or characters or moments from these stories that particularly resonate with you?
I just love, I forget, sorry, newbie. I love dinner at Aunt Connie's house because she's always saying my Aunt Connie is a wonderful artist and my mother was a wonderful artist. So I really can relate to that. And the painting of the dinner quilt, which is where the dinner at Aunt Connie's house comes from. So that's something that I can really relate to because she was painting these famous women. It's just a complete reflection of my mom. Aunt Connie is a complete reflection of my mom, who painted famous women and who chronicled the lives of famous women and who painted history.
Yeah, my response is directly related. I think a lot about it. It's not in one of the picture book illustrations, but I think about the story quilt, one of the French collection quilts where the title of it is Picnic in Giverny, where Faith Ringgold depicts this picnic of all of these women who have inspired her. One of them being Janetta B. Cole, who is a former president of Spelman College and one of my great inspirations and mentors. And so as I was preparing for this panel and really digging into the collection, the French collection in particular, I was just struck by her, interest in all of these women and the way that they really supported her throughout her entire career, and then B, the fact that she was in a way using magical realism perhaps or critical fabulation to bring together histories and people from different points in time that perhaps might not have all existed together. So she might have, Sojourner Truth sitting next to Janetta B. Cole. These two women never actually interacted, but are working in the same sort of trajectory and lineage that I now see myself continuing in as well. So that, for me, was just like emboldening for my spirit and makes me think of another phrase, keep the faith, that Mary Schmidt Campbell says, and that was also, who was also very important in Faith Ringgold's practice as well. She's a former president of Spelman as well.
We love Spelman. Another element of the stories that I think is really important, and I want to highlight for folks here, when we do these children's picture book exhibitions, sometimes the idea is just bring your kids, they'll have a good time. It's great for children. That is true in this one as well. But this exhibition also, because of the incredible amount of research and rigor in these stories, I challenge you to be the person who already knows every story in this exhibition. It goes so deep and broad in the history of what Black experience has been in this country, incredible leaders from across hundreds of years. I majored in history in undergrad. I like to think of myself as a relatively intelligent, well-read person. Many of these images feature people where this was my first time encountering them. I'm a bit ashamed, but also glad to say that this exhibition for all ages can offer you opportunities to be curious, to think beyond perhaps what you already know, or to reevaluate stories that you may have heard once, and have this opportunity to dig in again. I want now to give us a moment to turn to your questions. So if you haven't already, now's a great time to go ahead and use your phone to type in. But I'll go ahead and get this device pulled together. Let's see. First up is a big thank you. So thank you both. Yeah. I agree, big thanks. But next up, this first question, Nailah, I believe is for you. And it says, how, if at all, do you look at or approach or think about Ringgold's children's illustrations in relation to the rest of her work?
That's a really great question. Thank you to whoever posed it. What I am always really struck by is thinking about the timeline in Faith Ringgold's life and when she started making the children's books illustrations. It was towards the middle, sort of the end 1980s onward. And so I think about how Faith Ringgold was really depicting the violence of the 60s and wanted to have points of access for people to understand that. But then in the picture books and the children's books, she wanted to, in a way, distill those difficult memories and those difficult moments, but have it be a little bit more welcoming and happy, and something that children could understand and learn from, but also still get those difficult conversations across. And so it's almost as if she was looking back on the entire trajectory of her life, and in the picture books is able to consolidate everything that she learned and then pass it on to the next generation. So for me, the children's books are kind of like the crown jewel of her entire oeuvre, because she saw so much, she did so much, and she was able to give it back through the children's books. And it makes me think about access, again, that's my word of the afternoon, because as you were saying, Barbara, you can just have a history lesson for $5 at that time. But then also thinking about, children's books at nap time, at the doctor's office, in hair salons, which is something that I work on in a nonprofit that I founded in high school called the Brains with Beauty Project, where we put baskets of books in hair salons for young girls to read when they're getting their braids installed or whatever it may be. So having Faith Ringgold's books, not on the gallery walls, not far away in New York or even in Atlanta, in places where there's a barrier of entry, I think it's the most important part of our work. Yeah.
I really want to celebrate and uplift that work, Nailah. It's incredible that you were able to found this organization that's still going strong, that is allowing reading to be something that for young Black girls is immediately accessible and representative and reflective. It's truly beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well done. I see we have a question from, as you say, the one and only Michelle Wallace. So the question here reads, how does it feel to lead new readers of Mom's work and to provide the anchor for future readers? I'll take a first stab at this, but then I would love to hear your thoughts as well. A great joy for me is being in the galleries and seeing young people engage with these works. It's really a magical thing. It's part of why when you go in there, you'll notice that the works are hung very low. We want children to be able to discover this on their own terms. We want children to see this as something that is theirs. And a beautiful part of it is that children are able to explore it on their own without having to have an adult say, oh, this is what this is, let me tell you about. It's great if an adult wants to add context, don't get me wrong, and that it is so reasonable, accessible, beautiful, entrancing. You know, in some ways I feel like I'm doing precious little. The work itself is what's really inviting young people in. But I don't know, do you have any thoughts, Barbara, about generations or new generations reading or accessing these books?
I only want to say that Andrew took me on a walkthrough of the exhibition, and I absolutely love the exhibition. It's beautiful. There's a lot there. But the low hang, as you call it, is ideal for little small children. And the questions, you know, normally I guess in an exhibition you have what you call wall tags, but he has a column which is in the middle of the floor with questions on it. And my favorite question is the last question. He says, who's the person talking to? And what's the person asking? But then the last question is, who's listening? Who's listening to the person who's talking? Who's looking at the person who's talking? And I absolutely love that question, because there's always somebody talking in a story, but who's listening to the person? I love that question. That's so cool. And also, Nailah, I'm going to pass this question along to you, because you're the one with the box of books at the beauty parlor. We spend a lot of time at beauty parlors getting our hair braided. So please, could you talk about that box of books that you have at the beauty parlor?
Yes.
That's brilliant.
Oh, absolutely. So, you know, when I was in high school, I sort of transitioned from my mom doing my hair. Shout out, Mama. She's right there.
Hey, Mama. Filming us.
Yeah. Transition from my mom doing my hair to me wanting to go to the hair salon. And so I would go and I would notice that all the reading material there were magazines, were things that were not appropriate, were just like targeted towards a much older demographic. And so it seemed unfortunate to me that sometimes these hairstyles can take 6 hours depending on what kind of braids, if you're getting beads, if you're getting corn, whatever it's happening, it's long. And so it just seemed like a missed opportunity for me that children, even adolescents into high school, into college, are not able to have age-appropriate reading materials in beauty salons. So that was one of the issues that I was trying to solve. And then I was also thinking about the fact that there is so little literature that is representational of Black women and Black girls. So all of the Brains with Beauty books, so to speak, are focused or have protagonists of color. And that's really important to me, because you don't get that. You don't see that unless you really go hunting and really go looking. So because I went to a school where my friends were from all across the country, I was able to assemble a Brains with Beauty team, and they would bring baskets of books home with them over winter break, and we started planting them around the country. And as the organization grew, there also started to be a component where I was able to mentor and teach and have the brains part of it. In addition to the books and the beauty salon, we would started doing these lessons in classrooms, teaching girls about how to, get ready for the SAT, how to, really excel and to have good study methods and things like that. But then also wellness and how to take care of ourselves. How do you approach a difficult situation? So really trying to create nourishing and uplifting lesson plans for young Black girls, and then the books and the salons being a continuation of that, where salons are a place to take care of yourself. Let's add in some books and take care of the mind as well.
Really tremendous, really tremendous. We have a question that's coming from Deasia O'Hara, I hope I'm saying the name correctly, who is 12 years old. And the question, and I believe this might be for you, Barbara, is what's something that you see in your everyday life that brings you a memory from the stories? Is there anything in your everyday life that connects to any of the stories?
Oh my goodness, that's a difficult question. That brings me a connection to the stories. Well, the first thing that occurs to me is Rosa Parks on the bus, and I'm just grateful that I don't have to go through what she did. My mother wrote a book called If a Bus Could Talk, the story of Rosa Parks. And at her time, there was a problem. They didn't, in Montgomery, Alabama, there was racism, and black people couldn't ride in the front of the bus. They had to get on at the back of the bus, and sometimes the driver would drive off. And Mother wrote about this, and there was a massive bus boycott led by Martin Luther King, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And Rosa Parks became famous because she got on, and she sat in there was a black section on the bus. And Rosa Parks sat in the black section of the bus. And if the black section became filled up, no, that's wrong. If the white section of the bus became filled up, and a white person got on the bus, and there was no more seats, empty seats in the white section, the driver would tell a black person, you got to get up and let this white person sit down. And that particular day, Miss Parks had come from work and was tired. And she says, I'm sick of this. I'm not getting up. I'm staying right here in my seat. I'm tired of this. No, I'm not getting up. He said, no, lady, you got to get up out that seat. This white person is standing. And we can't have a black person sitting when a white person is standing. And that began a movement. And Mother writes about this in a book called If a Bus Could Talk. And this is something that it may not sound like a lot to you, young lady, but sometimes I think of it when I'm on the bus. Grateful that I don't have to ever worry about getting a seat on the bus, especially now that I'm a senior citizen. But sometimes we have to appreciate these things, especially in the present political climate, because rights are being taken away from us all the time. And things are getting a little scary right now. And I personally believe that we have to stick to our rights. This is America. And we have a constitution, and it's a democracy. So if my mother was alive right now, she would, oh boy.
She might have things to say.
Oh, she'd have a whole lot to say. So thank you for your thoughtful question. And yeah, that's one of the things that I think of, my rights, my legal rights, and if a bus could talk. And also my dream of Martin Luther King, he was involved in this bus boycott. And the bus boycott lasted hundreds of days, Michelle? Years. Long time. A complete boycott. Okay, we can't sit where we want to sit. We won't get on the bus. We won't ride the bus. The bus company practically went out of business. Practically ran out of business because the black people said, no, we're not doing this anymore. And they had to give in and let the black people get on at the front of the bus and sit where they wanted to sit because they were not going to be in business anymore. Stick up for your rights.
Did you have something there? Sorry.
Honestly,
No. Cool. Great.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, how do you follow? I think this is a really lovely question for us to round out on. It's pretty broad, but the question asks, can you all please speak on Faith Ringgold's practice, approach as a writer, storyteller, and spokesperson? I really like this question because I think that, yes, Faith Ringgold the artist, and Faith Ringgold the writer, and Faith Ringgold the storyteller, so much of what she accomplished was that she singularly was able to communicate broadly, to research, to dig up these histories, and to devise these incredibly creative ways of conveying them to huge swaths of the American public. It's kind of unbelievable. And I think in my own little lane, where I'm concerned about this country, and I worry about polarization, and I worry about people living in their own little lanes and not encountering different beliefs or anything beyond what they already agree to. One of the things that I find so incredible about Faith Ringgold's work is that it has so many ways in. Almost whoever you are, there is, or whatever your affinity, your experience, your identity, your belief system, you can still come into these works and find, more than likely, some things that will affirm you and some things that will challenge you, no matter where you are. And that, to me, is the storytelling brilliance of Faith Ringgold. Just incredible.
Yes, I agree with everything you've just said, Andrew, and I also think about how Faith Ringgold was insatiably curious. Oh my goodness, she was a sponge. She wanted to know everything. And I was reading an article that Michelle Wallace, the great, wrote, where she was looking through each of the quilts in the French collection and commenting on them in an article called Dancing at the Louvre. And one of the anecdotes, she says that Faith Ringgold loved listening to Zora Neale Hurston's Mules and Men on a cassette as she's painting, as she's creating, and these sorts of folk histories, this by Ruby Dee. Yes. We own it. Yeah. Yes. So reading that anecdote, thinking about Faith Ringgold being inspired, even by quilting practices and fabric practices in Thailand, she brought so many things together. I think that comes through in the way that she's able to communicate and to write with such eloquence and such fluency, and then to direct the way that she's writing to different audiences. That's where my mind goes, is that she just had a huge array of touch points, but kept the Black American experience at the core.
Would you like to share any thoughts about your mother as a storyteller or a communicator?
Well, the only thing I want to say is that Mom was a songwriter. And I just think of a video that I saw at her gallery where she's singing her jazz quilts. She started writing on her art because she couldn't get her memoir published, and she says, "Well, I can't get it published, but I'm going to write on the quilts." And of course, that's how Tar Beach got published, because she wrote on the quilt. And Andrea Cascardi saw the poster, a very large poster that the gallerist had printed, and she says, "Oh, this will make a good children's book." So she made these jazz quilts, and she was at the gallery one day and for an event, and the guitar player, he said, "Oh, you want to sing your jazz songs?" And she got up there. She's not much of a singer, but she got up there and sang anyway. So you say that she was a good communicator. She was such a good communicator that she got up there and sang those jazz songs. She wrote songs. And in the books there are songs. At the end of The Invisible Princess, there's a song because she wanted the children to be happy at the end of the book. She said the books must end happy. You don't want the children to be unhappy at the end of the book. So all of the slaves ascended at the end. The Invisible Princess is an African-American fairy tale about slavery. Go figure. That's what she called it. And at the end of the fairy tale, all of the slaves ascend to the town of Invisible, or the city of Invisible, and they sing a song. So you have to kind of make up the melody yourself, which Mom was very good at making up melodies. As long as it came in sound of a song, that would make it a melody. It didn't really have to make much sense. As long as you kind of sang it, then it would be. And that's the kind of communicator my mom was. And she would get up and sing at the drop of a hat. So that's what I want to say about her communication skills.
Incredible. I just want to bring this to a bit of a close by saying thank you. Thank you first and especially to you, Barbara and Michelle, for your willingness to allow us to do this exhibition. Curating this has been a joy and an honor. Nailah, thank you for coming from London to participate. We are so grateful for your thoughtfulness and your verve, and to all of you for coming out on a very warm afternoon. Thank you. We have more air conditioning in the museum and a really fabulous exhibition that I would love for you to experience. So thank you so much. Have a beautiful weekend.